happy to be here today, and as many people have commented, just in this fantastically beautiful space. And while we're thinking about the space, I want to actually ask you to consider not just the physicality of the space, but the setting and the way that we're relating to each other in this space. It's a familiar setting, right? It's one that we kind of all grew up in, where there's one person on stage, maybe two people at a time, sharing ideas, and the majority of people in the room are listening, hopefully engaged, but listening. And this kind of setting is really similar to many lecture halls and classrooms all across colleges and universities in this country. Rooms like this one, and this one, and increasingly sometimes like this one. And if you look and you think about this setting, these spaces say a lot about some of our fundamental beliefs about how people learn. These rooms say that we learn while sitting down, while listening, paying attention to the person, the expert in the front of the room, the proverbial sage on the stage. Many of these rooms can only be arranged in just that one configuration. The furniture is bolted to the ground and designed in such a way to limit interaction between most of the people in the room. They encourage us to write down and record what we're hearing for future study or reference. And what these rooms convey, what they say about what we believe about how people learn and how we should teach, these ideas are very, very, very old. They're at least 800 years old. Clearly, they come from someplace even older. So 800 years ago was around the time that the first universities were emerging in Europe. And what this means is that nearly everyone who works at or teaches at a college or university today was educated in this model. And so these basic ideas have been with us for a long time, and they're going to be very hard to change. But we are in the middle of a debate in this country about the value and the cost, and the form even, of our higher education. So one area of scrutiny right now is the admissions process. To get into college today, you have to have straight A's and AP classes and spectacular scores and really evocative personal essays and lead a community service club and play varsity sports and have a black belt in karate, and I could go on. I'm not even exaggerating. And what we're essentially creating is this extremely industrious army of high schoolers who are trying very, very hard to fit that one narrow definition of what it looks like to be successful. So one voice in this debate is a former professor from Yale named William Derosa. And he writes about his concern that we're essentially training a generation of young people to be good at jumping through hoops and conforming intellectually. In other words, he writes, are we just producing really excellent sheep? Now, I want you to look at the image on the screen and think about your own college experience for a second. I'm curious if anyone else sees themselves on the screen. I do. Did anyone else here go to college right after high school and work really diligently to make sure that you got through in the right amount of time in 4 years? I did. I, like a lot of students, was really good and conscientious about following those rules of school, and I never questioned, could it be different? Now, others of you may not see yourselves in this image, but may recognize some of your former classmates or your colleagues or your kids, particularly if they're going through the admissions process right now. Maybe you found that the conventional model didn't work for you, but you persisted anyway. But this is really the kind of model that's being held up as the brass ring that we should all aspire to in this country. Now, this kind of hot topic in higher ed has been playing out in the media all summer. Derosa published an excerpt of his new book in the New Republic that got a ton of attention. It was called Don't Send Your Kid to the Ivy League, and it showed a picture of the Harvard flag in flames, which was not very popular at Harvard. But it got over 2 million hits online. It drew a lot of attention. And his perspective is really controversial. So a lot of people don't think, and particularly some of the students that he's describing with this metaphor, don't think it's fair to hold them responsible for the failings of the overall system, or to somehow criticize them just because they work very hard and try to achieve success in the way that our society currently defines it. But I believe that Derosa is writing with genuine concern for this generation of students whom he describes as the kid that everyone wants at their college, but no one wants in their classroom. The student who will have much success, but little vision. And the kid who works very, very hard, but rarely questions authority. And I actually believe that this is a problem that we should all be interested in. Because this is a generation of students who are incredibly highly structured, but they're going to be entering an increasingly ambiguous world. It's the most complex, ambiguous world we've ever known, right? This is the world of Ebola, and ISIS, and climate change, and data security breaches. But it's also this world of tremendous opportunity to make really transformative change, as many of you are doing, through technology and design and industry and science. And so we need to be training our students not just to expect that they will be society's leaders, but also to be our most creative, daring, and resilient problem solvers. So I think it's really important to ask, can the current system of higher education produce it? Can the current system that we have actually produce creative thinkers and problem solvers? So the ecosystem in academia and the culture is a really old one. It's not built to change or adapt rapidly. But there are these two pressures that are happening right now that are kind of starting to get people off balance and to shake things up a little bit. So one is the abundance of new technology is starting to make us ask questions about what is the meaning of online learning and what does it mean to higher education, right? What is it going to mean when a student arrives for the first day as a freshman and she's already taken all of the introductory classes online? Or even better, what if students who have learned using some of the tools that Jake was showing earlier, that's what they're used to in elementary school and high school, and then they arrive and they come to our lecture rooms, right? This is going to happen soon, this change. The other thing that's happening at the same time is a real question and a set of concerns about the cost and the social and economic value of a college degree. And this is a really important question for us to grapple with, particularly because in this country, we've always had this goal that college is supposed to help establish social mobility. But at the moment, most efforts around innovation in higher ed have focused squarely around online learning. And until very recently, particularly around MOOCs, right? This idea that we could have these massive classrooms online accessible to everyone around the world. So at the Stanford D.School, we were really curious to look and see what was happening in the other direction. So over the past year, we wrestled with this question. What is the future of the on-campus experience in the age of online learning? And we brought students, like some that you see here, and faculty and designers together at the D.School to really look at this question together. What is so special and important about being in person while you're learning, being together, living in the community where you're learning, that students will even choose to enroll in a residential college experience in the future? So the first thing that we did was we wanted to really try to understand real students' experiences now. And so we equipped our students with video cameras and we sent them out on campus to interview their peers and get some of these stories. So I'm going to show you a very short video of a student named Becca, who was a senior when this video was shot. And Becca was a student who had really struggled and felt conflicted about her choice of major. And finally, actually, to break through this feeling of struggle, she did something kind of radical. She just stepped out of the system. She took a year off, and she worked in a professional capacity. She worked on a political campaign. So this is Becca, and I just want to say this video was shot by one of our students in a dorm, I think late at night. The quality is not great, but if you listen, what Becca talks about in terms of her personal journey and this real transformation that she experienced after coming back from her year off is pretty interesting.
The first thing for me is that, like, this year probably, and actually I took a year off from school, and I came back, and this year is the first time that I feel like I've actually, like, taken control of my education in a meaningful way, not like a meaningful way in the arc of education, but a meaningful way in like the arc of my life, in the arc of like learning things in life. So I no longer have really incentives to get good grades, and my grades are better than they've ever been. And I no longer have incentives really to like feel like I need to take a specific class, and I like my classes more than I've ever liked them before. And I do more of the work that's assigned than I ever have before, and I enjoy it a lot more.
Okay, so if you're an educator, that's what you want to hear. You want to hear, I do more of my work than ever before, and I enjoy it more, right? She's getting more out of it. And we want more Becca's. Becca is a student who stepped out of that line, right? She had to figure out how to hack the system. And we actually heard many of these stories of students who didn't really find that reason for their education. They didn't have that sense of ownership until they did something that was kind of different than the status quo, different than the expectations. And actually, to be honest, students who take a year off, I mean, we call it taking a year off, right? You're kind of like thought of as maybe someone who couldn't take it, or there's something a little wrong with you. So we haven't really validated that that's an appropriate thing to do, but it's so powerful when students do it. So the next thing that we did is we asked our students to go get some inspiration from beyond campus, and in particular from beyond formal educational environments. We really wanted to have them study learning kind of in its essence, outside of school. So we sent a group of students who went to visit SpaceX to try to understand how a really technical company fosters collaboration. And we sent a group of students to go behind the scenes at Cirque du Soleil. And they learned that even though the performers in the show were really kind of at the peak of their careers and conditioning, they were still required to take classes and learn new things so that they continued to learn. And this really challenged for our students what they had expected in terms of what it means to be an expert in the world. We also had a group who went down to LA and visited an organization called Homeboy Industries. And Homeboy Industries helps provide services that help rehabilitate people who have been in gangs and who want to be enjoying a more productive or mainstream life. And in addition to kind of tattoo removal and job training services, the organization has some really fundamental principles baked in. So for one thing, they don't do recruitment or marketing. You really have to be ready and to show up when you're ready to find them. And secondly, once you're admitted, you have to clear a drug test, but once you're admitted, they assign you an advisor, and then you, with your advisor, decide what combination of classes you might want to take. What's the right path for you? And they just don't believe that there's just one path to navigate their offerings or to find success. And our students were really inspired by both of these ideas, right? Showing up when you're ready and being able to chart your own path. And they wondered, why can't some of these principles be a bigger part of our college experience? So the work culminated this past spring when, after finding lots of insights like these, both from Stanford and beyond, we shared our ideas with the broader Stanford community. And these ideas were really meant to start conversations in this very formal environment. And to inspire people to try to think 10 or 15 years into the future, which is a longer term time horizon than we usually think with in academia. So I'm going to share 4 of these provocations with you today. The first is an idea that we called open loop university. So this idea really boils down to the following concept. If I told you that you could exercise every day for the next 4 years, and then at the end of the 4 years, you would be fit for the rest of your life, you would laugh, right? You might be really happy to hear that news, but you would probably laugh. And essentially, that's the model that we have baked into college, right? We give students one shot in early adulthood to kind of learn what they need to know, and then we spit them out into the outside world. But what if college wasn't just a time in your life, but it lasted your whole lifetime, right? What if instead of 4 years, you actually had 6 years of college to distribute over the course of your life? You could loop out into the working world when you needed some real experience, and you could loop back in to a university or college when you needed some kind of deeper learning experience. So avocados don't all ripen in exactly 8 days, right? But we somehow expect that kids are all ready to go to college at 18. And this was part of the provocation, right? This was an idea for what an advertisement might look like if Stanford decided to adopt the open loop university model. The next idea was around what we called paced education. What if actually we created a system where students could move through college at their own pace? So right now, college is just kind of arbitrarily structured into 4 years. And we know that students show up with all different skills and all different levels of readiness, but we only really offer them one rhythm. And for a lot of students, this means that, for instance, they have to declare a major before they have any real concept of what it might be like to work in that profession or to study that more deeply. So what if college abolished the class year and let students explore and focus and practice? We think actually that these are the 3 basic phases that students go through. They need to explore lots of topics in a light way to find out what's right for them. They need to focus and deepen and gain expertise in just 1 or 2 of them. And then they really need an opportunity to practice, to try and to fail and to try again. The third idea we called access flip. So we now live in a world where you can get any piece of information, basically, that you need at any time. So what if college in the future wasn't about accumulating information, but was really about developing competencies and skills? How would you actually share what you'd really learned at college with the outside world? In that scenario, could the college transcript be as unique as a human fingerprint and really show and emphasize the skills that you are prepared to use going forward instead of just being a record of the classes that you've taken in the past? The last idea that I want to share with you today we call purpose learning. So one of the things that is really a pleasure about teaching at a college or university today is that this generation is incredibly committed and really genuinely wants to do good in the world. So what if students declared missions, not majors? Or even better, what if they applied to the School of Hunger or the School of Renewable Energy? These are real problems that society doesn't have answers to yet. Wouldn't that fuel their studies with some degree of urgency and meaning and real purpose that they don't yet have today? And our goal is that they would feel as inspired and full of purpose as these 2 students. So we started with this question, can higher education be redesigned? But actually, I think that this is the wrong question. I think that the more important and actually the much harder question is to ask, can it fundamentally be changed, right? We remember the images of the lecture halls. This is a really old model, and it will take a lot to disrupt that paradigm. Where there is movement starting to happen, what's at the center of the conversation is technology and business models. But I really think that to create a new model of higher education that prepares students for that ambiguous, uncertain world of the future, we have to do more. As the creative community, and I really mean the community in this room, as designers, I think we need to be part of putting students at the center of that conversation. Thank you.